Welcome to the BetterWallet Podcast. Over the next few episodes, I'm going to be bringing in some of my friends and field experts who are going to help you to learn how to pay off debt, how to budget, how to invest the right way, and also how to become even better business owners. Normally, I would have individual episodes, but I wanted to add them in because I thought they would offer some really, really good tips for you to take control of your finances. Today, we're going to hear from Nika Booth. If you don't know who Nika is the owner of DebtFreeGonnaBe. She's an award-winning debt-free expert, fellow finance creator, and she paid off $189,000 of debt. Nika's story is one of triumph and fighting through many of obstacles, no matter how challenging they were. And I just can't wait to hear her complete story. I've heard bits and pieces of it, but we're going to talk about it on the BetterWallet podcast. She had some very trying times throughout her entire debt-free journey, but she prevailed, and now she's 100% debt-free and has become a go-to expert for all things student loan debt. During this episode, you'll learn more about Nika's story. You'll learn how to build a plan to pay off debt just like she did. Again, $189,000. And you will learn the current state of student loan debt forgiveness. But before I jump in, I wanted to thank everyone who's going out and actually leaving a review for the BetterWallet podcast. As I mentioned before, the BetterWallet podcast, like the currency for all podcasts, is leaving a review and a rating. And if you have done so already, I want to thank you for doing that. The BetterWallet podcast is top 25% on Buzzsprout and top 5% globally on Listen Notes. So if you have not reviewed the podcast yet, please do. The goal is to get to the top 1% globally on Listen Notes, and also be ranked within Apple Podcast and Spotify. But as I mentioned, ratings are the currency of the podcasting world. So I thank you guys for leaving a rating, but let's get into the episode and talk about debt freedom.
Welcome to the BetterWallet Podcast, a podcast where we talk to everyday people who have changed their lives through managing their money. We talk about their money journeys, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
And we're live. Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of the BetterWallet Podcast. As you guys know, the BetterWallet Podcast is all about demystifying the topic of money and sharing powerful money stories from people who truly beat the odds. Today, we have Nika Booth on the line. And if you don't know who Nika is, she's an amazing person. But let's talk about what she's been able to accomplish. Nika is an award-winning debt expert. She's a speaker, she's a financial creator, and the founder of DebtFreeGonnaBe. Her work has been featured in Business Insider, New York Times, Next Advisor, Time Magazine, which I guess they're all together, CNN Audio, CNBC, the list goes on and on. Not only is she extremely knowledgeable in a lot of things related to personal finance, specifically paying off debt, she's also really down to earth and very relatable. It feels like you're talking to your big sister every time you're talking to Nika. I'm really happy to have her on the podcast, and I'm really happy to discuss her journey and share powerful tips on how you can take control of your debt. Welcome, Nika.
What's up? Thank you, Marc. Thank you for having me.
Not a
And
problem
all
at
those
all.
accolades. What a wonderful introduction.
You're killing it. I remember when you won the reward for the content that you've put out over the
Yeah.
years, and I was like elated. I was like, let's fucking go. Because I know all the work that you've put in, not only
Yeah.
just learning what you've learned over time and the content you've put out, but also, paying off $189,000 of debt. Like
Whew.
I'm sure you've learned a lot through that process, and you continue to learn. So,
Absolutely.
I just want to thank you for sharing your knowledge and teaching people all across the world, like how they can go about paying off their debt, which happens to be one of the bigger financial challenges that people are dealing with.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's get into the icebreaker question. I told Nika that I wasn't going to prepare her for the podcast, and I also wasn't going to prepare her for the icebreaker question because I don't want any structure whatsoever.
You're not my friend.
Once I left corporate, I told myself that I'm going to do everything anti-corporate, like no structure, just going to
Yeah.
wing everything. So we're going to continue with that theme.
All
All right. Icebreaker question.
Yep.
It has nothing to do with finance, by the way.
Okay.
So if you're thinking about that, that's not the
Nope.
direction we're going in. Here's a question. If you had a movie about you, Nika, who would play you in a movie?
Issa Rae, hands
Mm.
down. She's authentic. She's funny AF.
Yep.
I just feel like if I needed someone to portray how transparent and authentic, or like how I enjoy showing up, doing the work that we do, but showing up as my authentic self, she would probably be the person that landed.
Interesting. So for anyone who's like, okay, I don't know who that
Oh,
is.
yeah, sure.
Like what movies has she been in? Like where has she, been an actor or actress?
Yeah. So she's all the things. She wears all the hats. Like she's a producer, director, all that stuff. Most people know her from her YouTube series back in the
Mhm.
day, The Misadventures of the Awkward Black Girl.
That's where I know her from.
Right. But she had Insecure on HBO. She
Mhm.
also produced Sugar Honey Iced Tea. I don't know if your podcast is PG or not. We didn't talk about that.
We can talk
But
about it.
and
Not
so
incorporating anymore. We can do whatever
you're
we
right.
want.
So Rap Shit is hers. Although I don't think she's in it. I think she just produced it. And she's in a
Mhm.
couple movies, but truth be told, I haven't seen any of the movies she's in. But that's like The Misadventures of the Awkward Black Girl and definitely Insecure are places that people would like definitely know her from.
Awesome. So guys, look her up so you have an idea of like what Nika's all about. I would totally agree. I think you hit that spot on.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. So that was an icebreaker question.
That was
Let's
cool.
actually talk about debt. Actually, before we even get into debt, let's talk about your upbringing first.
Okay.
I want to
Oh.
know about like little Nika, right? Like when Nika was growing up, how did you view money growing up?
I didn't really have a view of it. Honestly, it just seemed like this elusive thing. I grew up primarily, without getting into all the tea, I primarily grew up with a single mom. Money was just always something we didn't have. Like as a kid, like I'm a kid, like most kids will see things that are like, mommy, I want, or daddy, I want, or whatever the case may be. And I just know from as far back as I can remember, it was always, well, do you have that kind of money? So when I say, do you have that? It's always like, oh, I want McDonald's. Well, do you have McDonald's money? Or, oh, I want to go to Toys R Us. Well, do you have Toys R Us money? So I never saw it, and not blaming my mother or my parents because they're often the outcome of their own upbringing, right? But money just was never discussed in a positive way. It was never, this is what you do to make it. This is what you do to manage it. This is how you manage and pay bills. You manage your credit and so on and so forth. So naturally, somebody like me who's like, oh, I obviously have to be an adult, right? To
Mhm.
have money to want the things. Once I became adult and I started working, I was like, oh, okay. I can do all the things that I probably wanted to do as a child and wasn't able to because I didn't have that money. And so
Mhm.
I did it,
Right.
So, unfortunately, I wasn't raised in a household where money was routinely spoken about, where you saw the proper management of it.
Right. No, that's a really good point. I mean, I talk about all the time to a lot of my students is that, and you hit it right on the head. A lot of what we know comes from our parents, and our parents might have not been, they probably didn't grow up in an environment where they're like learning about finance or how to manage money or what have you. And I also bring up that, I didn't really think about money growing up because I just thought that it was normal to not have it. It wasn't until I went off to college that I realized that people actually have money, that I heard a thing about like generational wealth. My roommate in college was like, hey, like I'm just going to go and pay off my 4 years of college with one check. And I'm
Wow.
like, what? Like one check.
Interesting.
And then I learned about 529 plans.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
things like that opened my eyes to it. But yeah, I totally hear you. The quote of "Do you have McDonald's money?" was like something I heard every day because a brother loved McDonald's.
Listen, and an orange high C.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I would get the dollar iced teas.
Oh
So
yeah. Oh
if I
yeah.
ever have diabetes one day, that's
Listen,
because of
that's the reason why. Because
the
let me
iced
tell
teas.
you, McDonald's put every gram of sugar they could find in that
They
iced
sure
tea. It
do.
was so sweet. I haven't
Yeah, I
had
was
it in
drinking it
years,
up
but
and getting the
yeah.
refill too.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
so not only are you very accomplished in the personal finance space, you're also very degreed up. So
Oh
you're,
damn.
yeah,
Yeah.
very educated as well. So let's talk about college. Let's talk about like after high school. Like, when did you get to the point where you say, okay, well, I want to consider, hiring my education? And I should probably also ask, did your parents also go off to school?
No.
No.
I
Okay.
am first generation. I am the first person in my family to attend and graduate from college.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went into college right after high school, actually. My peers were, most of them who I was in class with, they were primarily white people. I just got to keep it a buck, and
Mm-hmm.
say what it is. They were all going to college, and I was like, oh, I gotta go too, right? And so family was like, oh yeah, go ahead and go to college. You're going to be the first college graduate of the family. But nobody was giving me anybody to go. So
Mm-hmm.
I had to take on student loans. And so I went right into, during the summer after graduation, I took a couple classes at the community college, and then entered my freshman year actually at Hampton University. It's not where I stayed, unfortunately,
Shout
although,
out to Hampton, though. Shout out to
right,
Hampton.
although I just knew I was going to be a Hampton pirate for life. But no, my stepfather actually left my mom. And that created just this cascade of events, a lot of them revolving around money. And so I came home, worked, got my first car note, got my second credit card because I got my first credit card as a freshman in high school for emergencies. And then, I wasn't in school. And then I was just like, you know what? I was sitting at the time, I was working at the front desk of a dentist office. And I was like, this is some bullshit. I'm ready to go back to school. Like, this is not, like, I understand, like, I should not have to, suffer for what the grown-ups have done, in this marriage between my mother and my stepfather. So I was like, nah, I'm supposed to be pre-med. I'm supposed to be, I'm supposed to be going to medical school. Anyway, so I decided to go back to school. And I was going back full-time and also working at the same time. Whoo, baby.
Wow.
And I was racking up loans. I was racking up student loans because that was the only way I could do it. Because again, nobody had money. Like,
Right.
nobody had it. And, I didn't do my due diligence either. Like, I had, like, my guidance counselor in high school was kind of crappy. So, like, I applied for some, like, scholarships and grants and got a little bit of money, but it was never what I really needed. So loans,
Right.
because in the back of my mind, I still had my peers that I was trying to keep up with. And I still had my family members, especially my grandparents, who I loved dearly and still do. But, I had them in the back of my mind, like, oh, I want to make them proud. I've got to keep pushing. So anyway, got out of Boise State University. I've got a bachelor's in biology and chemistry, and then immediately went to grad school because, again, I thought I had to keep up.
Yeah.
So I take on more loans. So I'm going to school part-time at this time. So I'm at Johns Hopkins part-time, but I'm working full-time, still not budgeting correctly, paying the bills as they come, like literally right before the due date and things like that. Like, just still being kind of reckless, graduate from Hopkins with my master's in biotechnology. And then
Wow.
At that point, I've got like $90,000 in student loan debt. And the bill comes and I'm still struggling to pay, because even though I'm working, and this is going to be relatable to a lot of people, you make decent money, but you don't know where your money is going. Like, for some reason, you're still struggling to get ahead, to make ends meet. And so unfortunately, I spent a lot of my 20s and 30s just shackled to debt, robbing Peter to pay Paul, what they say, swiping the credit card to go
Swipe the card and pray.
Absolutely. Right. And unfortunately, like, as you mentioned, like, I ended up, once I finally got serious about tackling my debt, which was just a few years ago, I had $189,000. And the sad thing is, majority of that, about $133,000, you're right, that's not how much in student loans I took out, but I had $133,000 in student loan debt. And majority of that, it ballooned because of the interest capitalization.
Were they mostly federal loans?
Oh, they were all, I never had private loans. They were all federal loans.
Sheesh. Yeah. I mean, just thinking about that number, $189,000 in debt. I mean, it's enough debt to really bring someone to tears.
Yeah.
So let's talk about it. I mean, I had my tear moment, my single tear coming down my cheek moment when I looked at my debt, and I only had $80,000 of debt. Like, what was that initial thought when you calculated everything and you said, golly, like, I'm almost, $200,000 in debt?
I'm about to cry just thinking about it, as if I'm still $189,000 in debt. It was defeating. I had, even before I calculated that number, I knew it was a big number. Like, I knew I could feel myself being out of control. And I had, if not two bouts of depression because of my debt. I remember struggling to show up to work, on time every day like I'm supposed to. And even when I did show up, it was such a struggle. I remember sitting in the parking garage at work and just crying just because like I didn't want to go in there. I was forcing myself because I knew, I had to show up at some point. And I just remember feeling like, even if I go in here, one, I don't want to do the work, but then also the situation is going to still be the same because again, I didn't have the tools that I have now, right? And
Mhm.
even when I started, I didn't have the tools, but I was like, something's got to give. I got to try something. Like,
Right.
I just remember like struggling to get out of bed every day, and my boss was like, "What's going on? Like, do you need help? Like, something's changed in you. Something's not right." I've told people like I've almost lost my job. Like, I've been warned. Like, you got to show up. Like, if you need help, get help, whatever. Yeah, it felt like a mountain. It felt like a weight that I wasn't strong enough to lift or
Yeah.
move.
And that could be, to your point, it could be crippling. And I look back now at my journey and I think about the same thing. Like, man, like I hated my job. I was $80,000 in debt. I was living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
And you might have felt the same way. I didn't know where to turn. And
Yeah.
I just thought the rest of my life was going to be that way. And there are probably people on the line right now saying, yep, that's me. And the cool thing, we didn't talk about this yet, but like Nika has paid off all of that
Mhm.
$189,000 of debt. She only has her mortgage at this point.
Yeah.
So she has been able to go through that entire journey. And we were talking about before the recording, but it's not a straightforward path. It wasn't for me. It wasn't for Nika. And, it's not straightforward for a lot of people. But for anyone who's on the line, they're just like, man, like, how did you knock all that out? Like, what was your plan to take out that kind of debt?
So I, like a lot of other people, started by listening to Dave Ramsey.
DR.
All
Yeah,
right.
same way.
I usually say he who must not be named, like he's Voldemort from Harry Potter. But I started off initially like listening to his teachings, trying to be strict, trying not to have fun and just solely focus on the dead. And I was miserable. And I was like,
Mhm.
there's no way this is going to happen. And so what I did was I just changed it up a little bit. Like, I used to budget and not budget for like fun, the things that I enjoy. I'm a huge Washington Nationals fan, which is baseball. Um,
I
I
didn't know
love
that.
going. Oh, I never told you. My bad. Okay,
Yeah,
so
talk about that.
yes, they're the 2019 World Series champions. But anyway,
Don't rub it in.
yeah.
My Phillies
So,
just lost. We'll run it
um,
back though.
I know. And so that was like stress relief for me. Like, it would take nothing for me to like leave the office when I was going to work and be like, hey, let's get a $5, $10 ticket, go to the ballpark and just go chill and watch a good game. And so I was like, I'm not giving this stuff up. I'm a single woman. I'm tackling this debt by myself. It's already enough that I don't have the luxury of splitting bills with anyone. Everything that goes wrong here is my responsibility, or everything that needs to be paid is my responsibility. And I was like, I'm not going to be miserable tackling this debt. So the
Mhm.
next budget I made, I had a line item. I used to call it blow money. And that was a hoot for people on social media. I used to call it blow money, but it was just money that my budget gave me permission to like
Mhm.
blow away, do whatever I wanted to. And 9 times out of 10, it was baseball, coffee, or happy hour. Like, that's
Right.
really what it is. And that's really how I really got started, because I knew I wasn't depriving myself and I was actually like incorporating things that mattered to me. I was ready to go full steam ahead. So I took what I knew was best for me and not restricting myself too much, but obviously setting up boundaries, and then things that DR would recommend. And I put them together and made my own, and I did it my way.
Right. No, I think that's a really good point. Just to kind of start off with DR. So I listened to his podcast, and that's
Mhm.
how I started my journey when I
Yeah.
was going back and forth to work.
Yeah.
And I hated my job and I was in debt, but like that was my only sense of freedom, is knowing
Yeah.
that like other people were able to pay off their debt. I'm going to not talk about him personally, but I will talk about what he taught me at that
Sure.
time.
Sure.
The baby steps gave me a direction, but to your point, I think everyone's different. Like, you
Yep.
might look at baby step number 3 and say, okay, well, that's not for me. And that's totally fine.
Yep.
Right. And I basically went through the steps. And as soon as I felt like it was too restrictive, I wanted to make it a Marc, baby step.
Absolutely.
Right. And that's, it seems like you're able to do the same thing. Another point that you made is the importance of building a budget that fits you. Right. I would always say, like, your budget should not feel like a jail sentence. If it does, then you're not doing it right. I think we
Correct.
grew up in an environment where a budget was a bad word, and
Yep.
it meant that it needed to be restrictive. And it's more of just a spending plan in a way where you're saying, okay, well, I'm going to allocate my dollars this way, but I'm also
Yeah.
going to have some fun as well. And for
Exactly.
me, same with you. Once I added in my line item of fun money,
Yep.
where I say, okay, well, I'm going to have $100, $200 to just have fun, that was going to take away from me paying off my debt quicker. I'm at least going to enjoy the process
Yep.
as much as I can. That completely changed it for me. Because
Absolutely.
I tell you, I was at a point where I almost wanted to just give up and be like, no, I want to be like everyone else
Mm-hmm.
and just live this debt life. But as soon
Mm-hmm.
as I added in that line item, I had so much more fun. Blow money, if you will.
Blow money.
But I did not spend it on blow. I did not spend it on blow. So that's how you went about, paying off your debt. I know
Mhm.
also that PSLF was a big factor as well.
Yes.
Can we talk about that for anyone who's like, what the hell is public service loan forgiveness? Can we
Yes.
just a couple sentences what that is?
Yeah, for sure. So public service loan forgiveness or PSLF is a program that actually forgives the remaining outstanding student loan balance for borrowers who work full time at a minimum of 30 hours per week for a federal, state, local, tribal, nonprofit or public service organization or any other not-for-profit. But it sounds great, and it is. It's getting a lot better, don't get me wrong, but there are rules even within the program. So that's just the qualifier. Your employer has to be a not-for-profit or a nonprofit organization. But
I felt like you
within
read that straight from the dictionary.
Oh,
Like, that just came straight off your dome.
because I talk
Crazy.
about public service loan forgiveness so much. I know I know
You're
it,
like,
right?
well,
Listen, right. So
killed
but
it.
you have to make stop, Mark. You have to make 120 payments in this program. So the equivalent of 10 years, but they don't have to be 120 consecutive payments. And I know you said just a few sentences, but let me get the rest of these rules out.
We're rolling.
Thank you. And then those payments, though, and this is where it gets tricky, those payments have to be made within 15 days of the due date, the full minimum amount due or your full monthly bill due, and paid while in an income-driven repayment plan. So the regular rules of PSLF are that if you're not in that repayment plan, an income-driven repayment plan, and I think there's like a few different types. It doesn't matter if you made that payment on time. It doesn't matter if it was the full amount due. It wouldn't qualify for PSLF.
And
And
there's so
so,
many different rules with it. And I would say that they're trying to make it better because I felt
mhm,
like initially I never qualified for it, but when I was talking to students and everything
yeah.
about it, and I have family members that are trying to qualify, it was archaic. It was very archaic of a
Oh,
system. It was not straightforward. And I know they're making a lot of changes now,
yeah,
which seem to be helping, but it's an amazing program.
yeah.
So if you are a part of a nonprofit and you feel like you fit the description that Nika eloquently described, then go to your HR office and or benefits office and have a conversation with them. Likely, if you qualify, they probably got that same question a couple
Yeah,
times throughout the week,
sure,
so they probably know.
sure.
So it doesn't hurt to ask. And
Yeah,
in Nika's case, she was able to pay off a lot of debt because of PSLF. Give it a try. The worst thing that could ever possibly happen is that you find out that you don't qualify.
yeah.
So
But you're right. I just want to say, yeah, you're absolutely right. And the approval rate for PSLF was anywhere between 1% and 2%. There were literally people who qualified for the program and they met all the criteria and they were denied. And so, that was part of the reason. That was only one part, but it was a very significant part as to what really got me serious in tackling my debt, because it's like, all right, I've been dedicating my career, taking a pay cut, working in public service, and it's not even guaranteed. Like I can't even
mm,
incorporate that in my debt payoff plan. that this program is even going to work. And so it's like, let me just go ahead and tackle my credit card debt, my car. We didn't even get into the tax debt. Like that was another thing, right?
Yeah.
And it was like, all right. And then that way, once it's done, I can just full steam ahead, tackle these student loans. But a waiver happened. So I don't know if you want me to go into the waiver or
Let's
you want me
talk
to
about
go
the
into the
waivers. I
tax
feel like
debt, whatever.
I feel like the waiver is the biggest secret that people haven't really been taught. I know you talk about it a lot. There's other pages
For
that
a
talk about it a
year,
lot. But
I
like,
talked to,
yeah, a lot of people don't know anything about the waiver.
yeah.
So I'll give you 5 sentences for this one,
Okay,
of like
cool.
what the waiver is
Yeah.
and how it can completely change your ability to get your loans removed through PSLF.
Well, I'll say this up front because I don't want to give anybody false hope. That waiver expired. That
Yep,
waiver
yep.
expired on October 31st.
That's right,
So
back in
in
October.
October of 2021, the Department of Education announced this limited waiver. And what this waiver did was basically relax pretty much all of the rules around PSLF, with the exception of the fact that you still had to work at least full time for a nonprofit organization. This waiver got or gave retroactive credit for payments that were late, outside of that 15-day time frame, payments that were made outside of an income-driven repayment plan. Like myself, when I started tackling my debt, I got out of income-driven repayment plan and I went into graduated extended because it was actually lower. And so, all the payments that I made at the time were not qualifying payments. They didn't count towards PSLF, but with the waiver, those counted. On top of that, periods that you were in forbearance where you had paused your payments, but interest was still accruing and capitalizing on your loans, they are still applying credit for those periods in time. So that waiver that lasted a year got millions of people, including me, closer to PSLF, actually getting the forgiveness of the program or absolute total forgiveness. Like people who had been denied before, they were able to reapply and immediately forgiven. And they ended up getting like checks in the mail from the Department of Treasury. Like the waiver was a godsend and I had no idea it was coming. But when it did, and I read all the rules, like I meditated on that information in the fact sheets that the White House put out, the Department of Education put out. And once I realized like what it was telling me, I'm like, wait a second, so I took out a calculator. I said, so my loans are going to be forgiven.
Right.
And that was, So, I mean, they're still processing paperwork. So, if you were pursuing PSLF or are pursuing PSLF and you submitted your employer certification form before the October 31st deadline, like pack your patience. Mohila, they're the loan servicer that's, taking, they're in charge of the public service loan forgiveness program or administering it. Pack your patience. They're slow.
Yeah.
You never know. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the waiver, when it came out, I learned it from your page and Student Loan Planner.
Yeah. Travis. Yeah.
Travis. Fun fact, he's a Vanguard buddy of mine. We're good friends. And we found out a few years ago that we had like separate businesses that were all within personal finance.
Wow.
I'm like, that's crazy. I'm really happy that he's talking about the similar topics.
Yeah.
But as you're kind of going through the waiver, as I mentioned, was like a big like no one knew anything about it because I know the government's horrible at like communicating certain things. I won't get started. But have you ever thought about the amount of lives that you've changed through talking about things like PSLF and like the waiver? And just, I mean, like I have to like think about that for a second. Like you putting that information out there, and I feel like a lot of people don't talk about student loan debt. The fact that you're putting this information out there, I'm sure you're changing so many lives. Not to make you cry.
You are though.
You change so many lives because there's so many people that are just like, man, I didn't know anything about that. And for them to have thousands, $100,000 of debt removed because of you putting out a post and being selfless, that's a complete game changer. So I want to give you your flowers during the BetterWallet podcast and just saying, hey, like, thank you. And if you don't hear it today, you hear it from me. Because you're changing lives for sure.
Thank you, Marc. I really do appreciate that. When you were asking, the emotion came because, yes, I do know I have received at least 100 messages from people, and I've screenshot them, and I've been meaning to share them. But yes, of people who have seen their loans forgiven, and they range anywhere from 12, 15,000 to over $100,000. And these are people who are able to now move on and do regular shit, like
Right.
buy a house, or go ahead and get married and pay for that honeymoon, or start their family, have a child, or whatever it is that people have been wanting to do but haven't been able to because of the burden that student loans are for millions of people. So yeah, I'm very aware, and it just getting messages, especially as people, like I said, Mohila is slow, as people slowly get like their paid in full letters, like it doesn't get old getting DMs like, because of you, this is what happened, and they send me a picture or a screenshot or something. It's amazing. It's an amazing feeling.
Yeah, I love that. Cause like sometimes like when tears come out, it's real, right? Like this is like real shit that we're dealing with. Like we're quote unquote influencers, but we're not just like going on the internet and like showing a nice outfit. Like we're talking about like
No.
real shit. Like we're talking
Yeah.
about finances. We're trying to get you from the shackles of, dealing with debt or living paycheck to paycheck. Cause we've done it. We've literally have
Yep.
done it and we've seen the other side. So I'm happy that we can go through it and help people kind of see the light and kind of move towards not having any debt and truly
Yeah.
reaching that financial freedom. But, the journey truly continues, at least with, the Supreme Court trying to get people,
Mhm.
Biden is essentially trying to help us, forgive more and more loans and
Yeah.
cancellation and all that stuff. And yesterday, this is really timely, the
Yeah.
Supreme Court started hearing oral arguments that basically challenge the student loan forgiveness plan by Biden. So
Mhm.
could you maybe briefly talk about like what's the state of the student loan debt forgiveness program as of today? If you had a
We
chance to have your coffee this morning and look at the news, where are we at with all that?
So the truth is, we don't know. Like, I'm still processing. Yesterday, there was a rally downtown, and I'm also trying to read the transcript from yesterday that's
Yeah.
finally live from the oral arguments. We don't know. Honestly, we don't
Mhm.
know any more than what we did before the oral arguments happened. So as of now, Biden's student loan forgiveness plan is completely blocked. Arguments were yesterday, and it's hard to determine exactly, who's going to vote how.
Right.
For anyone who doesn't know, we've got 9 Supreme Court justices, and it is a 6-3 split. We have 6 conservative judges on the Supreme Court. And so, you know, if you were to ask me, do I think they will uphold Biden's student loan forgiveness plan? Nah, I don't. I know, but it's hard to say because we heard from some justices that I don't think we were expecting to hear from yesterday. They were
Mhm.
actually kind of like grilling, kind of asking very pointed questions to the plaintiffs in this case. And so I don't know, all I do is I recommend no matter what's going to happen, just know that those payments are going to resume because it's tough. Like we get so caught up in Biden's student loan forgiveness plan, this up to $20,000 in student loan forgiveness. But we also forget when the payments resume is tied to the outcome, or not necessarily the outcome, but when we receive the ruling, like tied together. And so I try not to get people to lose a sense of the fact that a bill gonna come due real soon that hasn't been around for 3 years.
Three
If you
years.
have
Yeah.
right, if you have federal loan. So, the answer is we don't know. We expect the Supreme Court to rule by June.
Mhm.
Some people are saying maybe late April, May. I don't know. Just for anyone listening, just know that payments will resume June 30th or 60 days after the court rules.
Right.
All right.
So the biggest advice that I can give you guys is like to start planning now for
Plan
whatever
now.
ruling that could come out. Because the best
Absolutely.
possible case scenario is that you go and you build a budget, you have in your head, okay, well, here's how much I'm going to have to allocate towards student loan debt. And let's say it comes out and by the grace of God, like, you do get your debt removed. That's going to be money that you're not going to be able to invest and actually
Yes.
put to work for you.
Yeah.
But if not, then you have a plan and you don't have an unexpected bill coming up, whenever it comes out, June, July,
Mhm.
August, and, put you further and further into a hole. So thank you for the update on that. And I'm looking forward
Absolutely.
to hearing what they have to say.
Me too.
I do not have any more federal student loan debt, but I know of just so many people, students, friends that have it, and it's literally crippling them. And
Yeah.
I hope that we can do the right thing as a country. It's going to help us, 20, 50, 100 years down the road. So
Yeah.
as we're kind of wrapping up, I told you I was only going to hold you for 30 minutes, and we're
It's
6 minutes
okay.
over.
You talk a lot, Mark. No, I'm kidding.
We can really go for multiple hours just talking all
Yeah.
things finance and personal. It's funny because we did that in Atlanta when she was here. What was
Yep.
that, a few weeks ago? We
Yeah.
literally just sat there and ate Mexican food and
Yeah.
had some drinks and just
For
just
hours.
chatted for a long
Yeah.
time. Yeah. So for anyone who's on the line who's like, okay, I get everything you're saying right now, but give
Yes.
me 3 actionable tips on how I can take control of my debt. Like, what
Yeah.
would be those 3 actionable tips? I
The
can help.
first, yeah, absolutely. I got this. So the first thing is you absolutely have to know what you owe, who you owe it to, and when you owe it. So I know it can feel overwhelming and stressful to think about writing all of your debt down, but you have to, because in order for you to create a plan that is actually workable, like something you can tangibly do and measure, you have to have all the information. All
Mhm.
right. So check your bank statements, check your credit report, look at your loans, whatever you have that is considered debt, even if you owe your brother $50, write it down and add it up. Take note of interest rates, take note of the due dates and the minimum payment due, because you'll need that. That's first and foremost. The second thing is, and it's funny because Mark, people will ask us, how do you start paying off debt? The answers are always the same because it doesn't change, right?
Mhm.
You have to do these basic things. You need a budget. Call it a spending plan. I don't care. And as Mark and I like to say, a budget is not a list of bills, right? It's not just Netflix, your rent, your mortgage, insurance. It's not that. Your budget has to be realistic. So that means it has to incorporate things that you enjoy doing, your savings goals, investing goals as well.
Mhm.
Make it plain, write it down. But that is also an exercise in learning where you're spending your money and where you may need to make some cuts to free up money so that you can actually pay off your debt. That's
Mhm.
very important. And Mark, I know you talk about this on your page, and I know you've talked about this on this podcast. Additionally, you got to figure out how you're going to tackle your debt. And so you want to figure out a repayment plan. There's 2 common types: debt snowball, which is the tackling the smallest debt first while paying the minimum on the others, and then the avalanche, which is actually my favorite one, where you're tackling your debt with the highest interest rate first. And that'll save you the most in interest in the long run. I started off with the debt snowball because I had 6-figure debt. I knew I needed to start small. I needed to feel good about what I was doing, needed some momentum. So I started with the debt snowball, but switched it up because let me tell you something, when you're paying interest month after month, it gets old real fast. So those are my 3 tips. And those are literally the 3 steps that I use and then I teach people to use to start tackling their debt.
Amen to that. Yeah. As it relates to snowball and avalanche method, I call it using a hybrid, using both of them. Because
Yes.
to your point, I was doing the debt snowball initially. Then I was like, I have to switch it up. Like literally one day I was like, I'm getting bored of doing this. Let me
Yep.
go and do something else. So there's
Yep.
nothing wrong with switching it up, guys, and
Nope.
using the hybrid method. Whatever works, whatever makes you excited to pay off your debt, try to gamify that as much as possible for you to go
Yeah,
in and pay that off.
for sure.
So Nika, for anyone who's like, she's speaking facts right now, I need to follow her. Where can they find you online?
In these Instagram streets, that's where I live. You can follow me on Instagram at DebtFreeGonnaBe. Also, I only have one account. It is
Mhm.
DebtFreeGonnaBe. GONNAB. It doesn't have a period, extra letters, underscore, dash. Don't get caught up because
Mhm.
the imposter accounts are out there. But that is primarily where I am. And I also share a lot about my personal life in my stories. So make sure you check those out too.
Check her out, guys. Yeah, don't get scammed out there. Make sure you follow the right account. And as a best practice, you can always, I'm going to blow up your DMs, but you can send her a
Oh,
DM
yeah, for
and
sure.
just confirm if it's the right account. And that's one way to keep from dealing with these stupid bots until everyone gets verified. So I'm excited for that.
We
For
got to talk about
everyone.
that we got to talk about that after this recording real quick.
Yeah, for sure. So guys, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Better Wallet Podcast. And I will talk to you guys at the next episode. Talk to
Thank
you
you,
then.
Mark. Bye.
Okay.
Thanks for tuning in to the BetterWallet Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you found any value, we'd appreciate a rating and review.